I went to my second home with a property management company to prepare it for rental and found my sister and her 3 kids living there. She laughed and said, "Mom and Dad gave me permission. If you don't like it, why don't you call the police?" When I said, "Then I will," she started to panic. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The elevator ride up to the penthouse floor always felt like a decompression chamber to me. Usually, as the numbers climbed higher, leaving the humid, chaotic streets of Miami Beach far below, I would feel the knot in my shoulders loosen. I would close my eyes and visualize the space awaiting me, the pristine white marble floors that cooled your feet instantly, the scent of sea salt and expensive sandalwood from the diffusers, and the absolute, church-like silence of a space designed solely for peace. But today, the knot in my shoulders wasn't loosening. It was tightening into a painful spasm right at the base of my neck. Standing next to me in the private elevator was Mark, the senior property manager from the luxury agency I had hired. He was checking his watch, vibrating with that nervous energy of someone who wants a deal to close perfectly. And behind us stood Dr. Reynolds and his wife, Clara. They were the kind of tenants every landlord dreams of. He was a neurosurgeon on a fellowship, she was an art historian. They were quiet, wealthy, and had specifically requested a minimalist, high-end environment because dust and clutter triggered Clara's allergies. I had sold them on this apartment as if it were the crown jewel of South Florida. I told them about the custom Italian leather sofa that had taken 6 months to ship from Milan. I bragged about the rare, first-edition art books arranged by color on the floating shelves. I described it not as an apartment, but as a sanctuary. "You're going to love the natural light in the afternoon," I said, forcing a bright smile as the elevator chimed, signaling our arrival. "The soundproofing is state-of-the-art. Once you're inside, the world just disappears." The heavy steel doors slid open. The first thing that hit us wasn't the light. It was the smell. It was a thick, humid wall of odor that physically assaulted us before we even stepped into the hallway. It smelled like a mixture of stale frying oil, wet dog, dirty laundry that had been sitting in a hamper for weeks, and something sharp and acrid, like a dirty diaper. I stopped dead in my tracks. My hand hovered over the biometric scanner of the front door. Is that coming from your unit?" Dr. Reynolds asked, his voice muffled as he instinctively brought a handkerchief to his nose. "It can't be," Mark said quickly, though his face had gone pale. "The cleaning crew was scheduled for yesterday. Maybe they used a strong chemical cleaner?" But I knew that smell. It wasn't chemicals. It was the smell of neglect. It was the smell of chaos. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that echoed in my ears. I pressed my thumb against the scanner. Usually, it would beep a cheerful green and unlock with a soft click. Today, the light flashed red. Access denied. I frowned and tried again. Red. Access denied. "That's odd," I muttered, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "The smart lock seems to be jammed." "Maybe we should reschedule," Mrs. Reynolds said, stepping back into the elevator. "I'm very sensitive to smells, and this is." "Please, just 1 second," I pleaded, desperate not to lose the contract. I dug into my purse for the physical emergency keycard, the one I kept for power outages. I swiped it. The lock disengaged with a heavy thud. I pushed the door open. The scream died in my throat. My sanctuary was gone. It had been obliterated. The living room, which I had designed to look like a spread in Architectural Digest, looked like a frat house after a weekend bender. The white Italian sofa, my pride and joy, was unrecognizable. It was buried under a mountain of unfolded laundry, greasy pizza boxes, and a duvet cover that I recognized from my parents' house. There were dark, suspicious stains on the armrests that looked like chocolate or mud. The floor, usually a gleaming expanse of polished stone, was a minefield of plastic toys. Legos, dolls with missing heads, and sticky juice boxes were scattered everywhere. But the centerpiece of this disaster was the human element. Sprawled out in the middle of the room, lying on my $5,000 area rug, was my older sister, Brenda. She was wearing stained sweatpants and a t-shirt that was 2 sizes too small, her hair a bird's nest of tangles. She was holding a family-sized bag of cheesy chips, lazily tossing them into her mouth while watching a blaring cartoon on my massive flat-screen TV. Surrounding her were her 3 children. Mia, the teenager, was lying on my Barcelona chair with her shoes on, shoes that were visibly dirty, scrolling through her phone. The 2 younger boys were engaged in a wrestling match right next to a glass pedestal that held a fragile ceramic sculpture I had brought back from Kyoto. I stood there, frozen, my brain unable to process the visual data. It was like walking into your own home and finding aliens had colonized it. "Mom," one of the boys yelled. "Someone's at the door." Brenda didn't even sit up. She just craned her neck around the back of the sofa, chewing loudly. When her eyes landed on me, there was no shock. No guilt. No scramble to cover up the mess. There was just annoyance. "Audrey," she said, her voice muffled by the food. "God, you scared me. You could have called, you know. We're in the middle of a movie." I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. Behind me, I heard a sharp intake of breath from Mrs. Reynolds. "This is the minimalist sanctuary?" Dr. Reynolds asked, his voice dripping with ice. "It looks like a daycare center run by hoarders." I don't understand," Mark stammered, looking from the tablet in his hands to the disaster in front of him. "The unit is listed as vacant. Who are these people?" Brenda finally sat up, wiping her orange, cheesy fingers on her pants. "We're family," she announced loudly, glaring at Mark. "Who are you?" I couldn't speak. I looked at the coffee table. My beautiful glass coffee table was covered in rings of condensation from soda cans without coasters. There was a half-eaten sandwich sitting directly on the glass. "Audrey, we're leaving," Dr. Reynolds said firmly. He pressed the elevator button repeatedly. "This is unprofessional and frankly, disgusting." "Wait, please." I finally found my voice, turning to them. "This is a mistake. An intruder. I can have this cleaned up by tomorrow. Please, don't go." "Cleaned up?" Mrs. Reynolds pointed a manicured finger at the wall. "There is crayon on the wall. And the smell, absolutely not." The elevator doors opened, and they practically ran inside. Mark looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. "I have to go after them, Audrey. I have to try to fix this. Call me when this is resolved." He jumped into the elevator just as the doors closed, leaving me alone in the hallway. I turned back to the room. The air was thick with tension and the smell of cheap snacks. Brenda was staring at me, looking bored. I stepped over the threshold, my heels crunching on something that turned out to be a dry cereal loop. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, my voice trembling with a rage so profound it felt dangerous. Brenda popped another chip into her mouth. "Living," she said simply. "Obviously." The sheer nonchalance of her answer hit me harder than a slap. "Living?" I repeated, stepping further into the room. I felt like an intruder in my own home, tiptoeing around the debris of my life. "You aren't living here, Brenda. You're destroying the place. Do you have any idea who those people were? Do you have any idea how much money you just cost me?" Brenda rolled her eyes, a gesture so familiar from our teenage years that it made my stomach churn. "Oh, relax, Audrey. Always about the money with you. Money, money, money. It's sad, really." She grabbed the remote and turned the volume down, but didn't turn the TV off. The flickering light of the cartoon characters played across her face, highlighting the smugness there. "Those were snobs," she continued, gesturing toward the elevator. Did you see the way that woman looked at us? Like we were cockroaches. You're better off without tenants like that. They would have complained about everything. They were going to pay $6,000 a month. I screamed. The sound of my own voice startled me. I never screamed. I was the cool, collected professional. But seeing Mia's dirty sneakers digging into the leather of my Barcelona chair, a chair that cost more than Brenda's first car, broke something inside me. Get your feet off the furniture, Mia. Now! Mia looked up, startled, and slowly lowered her feet, shooting a sullen look at her mother. Don't yell at my kids, Brenda snapped, standing up. She was taller than me, heavier, and she used her size to intimidate. She walked around the sofa, kicking a pile of laundry out of her way. We just got settled. They're sensitive. Settled? I laughed, a hysterical, sharp sound. You're not settled. You're trespassing. How did you even get in here? The codes were changed. The doorman knows not to let anyone up. Brenda walked over to the kitchen island, which was covered in open jars of peanut butter and sticky jelly spills. She grabbed a bottle of water, my imported mineral water, and cracked it open. Mom helped us, she said, taking a long swig. She's worried about you, Audrey. She thinks you're making a mistake moving to California alone. She thinks you're abandoning the family. So the solution to her worry is to help you break into my apartment? It's not breaking in if you have a key, Brenda smirked. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a key. It was the silver emergency key with the red tag. The one I kept hidden in a locked pouch in my purse. My breath caught in my throat. You went through my purse? Mom did, Brenda corrected. When you were at the house 2 weeks ago. You left your bag on the table when you went to the bathroom. Mom said it was divine intervention. She saw the key and knew it was a sign. A sign? I felt dizzy. It's theft, Brenda. It's larceny. It's family. Brenda slammed the water bottle down on the granite counter. God, listen to yourself. You have this massive, empty palace, and your own sister was about to be homeless. Mom and Dad agreed that this was the only solution. You weren't using it. I needed it. It's simple math. It's not math. It's my property. I was shaking now. I have a mortgage to pay. I have overhead for the new business. I cannot support you and your 3 kids and your destruction. Look at this place. It smells like a landfill. We'll clean it up, Brenda waved a hand dismissively. Once we get unpacked. We've only been here a day. We're still adjusting. Unpacked? I looked around and noticed for the first time that there were cardboard boxes stacked in the corner. Not just overnight bags. Moving boxes. You moved everything in? You actually think you're staying? Mom said we could stay as long as we needed, Brenda said, crossing her arms over her chest. She said you wouldn't mind once you saw how happy the kids were. Look at them, Audrey. They finally have space to run around. Mia loves the view. Are you really going to be the monster that kicks her nieces and nephews out onto the street? She was using the children as human shields. It was her classic move. Weaponize the kids, weaponize the guilt, and hide behind the approval of our parents. I am not kicking you onto the street, I said, trying to steady my voice. I am telling you to go back to wherever you were living. Or go to Mom and Dad's house. But you cannot stay here. We can't go to Mom's, Brenda said, her voice dropping to a whisper, trying to sound pathetic. Her house is too small. The boys fight. It's too stressful for Dad's heart. And my old apartment, well, the landlord was a jerk. He evicted us for no reason. For no reason? I challenged. Or was it because you didn't pay rent and trashed the place, just like you're doing here? Brenda's face hardened. The pathetic act vanished. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Just because you have money. You think you can judge me. I am judging your actions, Brenda. You broke into my home. You stole from me. You are currently destroying my assets. I want you out. Now. Pack your boxes. I'll give you 1 hour. Brenda laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. She took a step closer to me, invading my personal space. I could smell the stale onion on her breath. No, she said. Excuse me? I said no. We're not leaving. This is perfect for us. The school district is great. The building has a pool. Mom gave me permission. Dad gave me permission. It's 2 against 1, Audrey. Majority rules in this family. This isn't a democracy. I yelled. I own the deed. Then do something about it, Brenda hissed, leaning in until her nose was inches from mine. But be careful. If you throw us out, Mom will never forgive you. Dad will never speak to you again. You'll be the villain in the family story forever. The rich, heartless bitch who chose money over blood. She paused, a cruel smile playing on her lips. So, if you don't like it, Audrey, why don't you call the police? Go ahead. Call them. Have your own sister arrested in front of her kids. Do it. If you have the guts. She stared at me, her eyes challenging, mocking. She was betting everything on my history of submission. She was betting on the fact that I had spent 30 years trying to please our parents, trying to be the good girl. She knew I would die of shame before I let a police car pull up to the building. But as I looked at her, at the smug entitlement, at the grease stain on her shirt, at the ruin of the life I had built brick by brick, something shifted. The shame didn't come. Instead, a cold, hard clarity washed over me. You really think I won't? I asked quietly. I know you won't, she sneered. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. Watch me, I whispered. I unlocked the screen. Brenda's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she didn't move. She thought it was a bluff. I tapped the keypad. 9. 1. 1. To understand why my finger hovered over that green call button and why it felt like I was holding a detonator to my entire life, you have to understand the architecture of my family. In the blueprint of our family, Brenda was the main structure, the grand facade. I was merely the scaffolding, necessary for support, but meant to be taken down and hidden away once the real building was admired. Growing up in the suburbs of Fort Lauderdale, the dynamic was established before I could even walk. Brenda, 7 years older, was the golden child. She was loud, charismatic, and demanding. She took up all the oxygen in the room. If Brenda had a scraped knee, it was a medical emergency. If Brenda wanted ice cream, we all went to Dairy Queen. I was the quiet one. The easy one. I learned very quickly that the best way to survive was to require nothing. My parents, Robert and Barbara, were constantly exhausted by Brenda's drama, her grades, her boyfriends, her temper tantrums. They had no energy left for me. So I became self-sufficient. I made my own lunches. I did my own homework. I signed my own permission slips. I convinced myself that this was a virtue. I told myself, I am the good daughter. I am the one who doesn't cause trouble. I thought that if I was perfect enough, quiet enough, successful enough, they would eventually notice me. I thought I was earning love points that I could cash in later. But the most painful memory, the one that played on a loop in my nightmares, happened when I was 12 years old. It was the night of the spring piano recital. Music was my escape. While Brenda was out cheerleading and sneaking boys into her room, I was at the piano. The keys were black and white, logical and fair. If you practiced, you got better. It was the only place in my life where effort directly equaled result. I had been chosen to play the closing solo, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was a melancholic, beautiful piece that I had practiced until my fingers ached. For weeks, I reminded my parents. The recital is on the 14th, 7 p.m. Please don't be late. We'll be there, honey, Mom had promised, distractedly stirring a pot of spaghetti while listening to Brenda complain about a pimple. We wouldn't miss it. On the night of the recital, I put on my navy blue velvet dress. I felt like a princess. I saved 3 seats in the front row with little handwritten signs, reserved for Audrey's family. When the curtain rose, the auditorium was packed. Parents were waving at their kids, holding camcorders, adjusting tripods. I scanned the front row. My 3 seats were empty. My heart started to race. Maybe traffic, I thought. Maybe parking. I sat through 20 other students playing Mary Had a Little Lamb and botched versions of Beethoven. Every time the door opened at the back of the hall, I perked up. But it was never them. Finally, the instructor called my name. And now, our closing performance, Audrey. I walked to the Steinway. The stage lights were blinding, hot against my skin. I sat down on the bench and looked at the front row one last time. Still empty. The 3 reserved signs looked like little tombstones. I played. I poured every ounce of my loneliness, my disappointment, and my longing into that nocturne. I didn't miss a note. The music swelled and faded, a perfect cry for help that no one heard. When I finished, there was polite applause. I stood up, bowed to the darkness, and walked off stage. I went straight to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and dry-heaved until my throat burned. When I finally came out to the lobby, most of the families had left. But there was one person waiting for me. Aunt Sylvia. She was my father's younger sister, the eccentric one who lived in a condo downtown and traveled to Europe alone. My parents tolerated her, but they always spoke about her with a hint of pity because she never married. She was standing there holding a single yellow rose wrapped in plastic. That was transcendent, Audrey, she said, her voice fierce. She didn't ask where my parents were. She knew. She looked at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and cigarettes. They aren't coming, I whispered into her coat. No, she said softly. They aren't. But that is their loss, not yours. She pulled back and looked me in the eye. Listen to me, Audrey. You are going to be bigger than this town. You are going to build a life so full and so beautiful that you won't need them to fill the seats. You hear me? I nodded, though I didn't fully believe her. When I got home that night, the house was dark. They came in an hour later, laughing. Brenda was holding a giant teddy bear. Oh, Audrey! Mom said, seeing me waiting on the couch. I am so sorry. But Brenda had a crisis. Her boyfriend broke up with her right before we left. She was hysterical. We couldn't leave her alone. We had to take her to the movies to cheer her up. We knew you'd understand, Dad added, patting my shoulder. You're the strong one. The strong one. That was the consolation prize. Brenda got the attention, the love, the time. I got to be strong. Standing in my trashed penthouse 20 years later, staring at Brenda, I realized nothing had changed. They were still prioritizing her crises over my achievements. They had destroyed my sanctuary just like they had destroyed my recital. But Aunt Sylvia was right. I had built a life. And I was done letting them tear it down. I left home the morning after my 18th birthday. I didn't run away, I just packed my life into a used Honda Civic and drove south to Miami. I enrolled in design school and got a job waitressing at a high-end steakhouse. The next decade was a blur of exhaustion and ambition. I worked 16-hour days. I ate ramen noodles and slept on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment that I shared with 2 other girls. I didn't date. I didn't party. I studied textures, lighting, and architectural flow. I learned how to talk to contractors and how to negotiate with suppliers. Slowly, Audrey Interiors grew. My first big break was renovating the lobby of a boutique hotel in South Beach. The owner loved my minimalist, Zen-inspired aesthetic. Word of mouth spread. By 28, I was designing penthouses for tech CEOs and vacation homes for celebrities. Every check I deposited was a brick in the wall I was building between myself and my past. Buying the penthouse overlooking South Beach was supposed to be the final brick. It wasn't just a home, it was a trophy. I designed every inch of it myself. I imported the marble from Italy. I commissioned the lighting fixtures from a local artist. It was quiet, white, and pristine, the exact opposite of the chaotic, noisy house I grew up in. Meanwhile, Brenda's life was spiraling in the opposite direction. She had peaked in high school. At 20, she married Rick, a guy from a wealthy family who loved partying as much as she did. For a few years, Brenda lived the high life, country clubs, new cars, expensive vacations. During those years, she looked down on me with pity. Audrey is just obsessed with work, she would tell our cousins at Thanksgiving, sipping wine I had paid for. It's sad. She's going to end up alone. A spinster with a nice sofa. But Brenda's fairy tale didn't last. Rick got tired of her spending and her explosive temper. The divorce was brutal. Rick had the better lawyers. Brenda walked away with limited alimony and custody of 3 kids she wasn't prepared to raise alone. Instead of getting a job, Brenda bounced from one boyfriend to another, and then back to mom and dad. She burned through her settlement money on clothes and vacations, trying to maintain the image of wealth. As my success grew, Brenda's pity turned into a venomous jealousy. She couldn't stand that the invisible sister was now the one driving a Mercedes. "It must be nice," became her catchphrase. Must be nice to take vacations whenever you want. Must be nice to not have kids holding you back. Must be nice to just throw money at problems. She never saw the work. She only saw the result. And to her, and to my parents, my wealth wasn't mine. It was a family resource pot that I was selfishly hoarding. Whenever I visited, the conversation would inevitably turn to money. "Your sister is struggling, Audrey," Dad would say, looking at my designer handbag. "Maybe you could help with Mia's tuition? It's pocket change to you." "I'm not an ATM, Dad," I would say. "You've changed," Mom would sigh. "You've become cold." Money changes people. They made me feel guilty for succeeding. They made me feel like my hard work was an act of aggression against Brenda's failure. But I kept pushing. I set my sights on the West Coast. Beverly Hills was the major leagues of interior design. I found a perfect location for a showroom on Rodeo Drive. But the overhead was astronomical. I needed liquidity. That's when I hatched the plan. I would move to LA, rent out the Miami penthouse for top dollar, the market was exploding, and use the rental income to float the new business until it became profitable. It was a brilliant, pragmatic financial move. I hired Mark. We found the Reynolds. It was all falling into place. I was finally going to put 3,000 miles between me and the crab bucket of my family. But I made one fatal error. I wanted validation. Just once, I wanted to see pride in my parents' eyes. So, 2 weeks before the move, I drove to Fort Lauderdale. I brought a folder with the architectural renderings of the new LA studio. I brought expensive pastries. I wanted to share my joy. I didn't know I was walking into a trap. I didn't know that my success was about to be used as the weapon to destroy me. The memory of that visit 2 weeks ago was now playing in my mind with terrifying clarity. I could see the clues I had missed. I had arrived at my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. The house was stiflingly warm. Dad refused to turn the AC down below 78 degrees to save money. The television was blaring a golf tournament. Audrey! Mom wiped her hands on a dish towel. She looked tired, her eyes darting nervously toward the hallway. We weren't expecting you. I have big news, I said, placing the box of pastries on the clutter-filled dining table. I wanted to tell you in person. I sat them down. I opened my folder. I showed them the renderings of the Beverly Hills showroom. I'm moving to California, I announced, beaming. I'm expanding the firm. There was a long silence. Dad frowned. California? That's far. It's a huge opportunity, Dad. And what happens to the apartment here? Mom asked immediately. Her voice was sharp. I'm renting it out, I explained. I already have a tenant lined up. A doctor. He's paying 6 months up front. That money is going to fund the expansion. I didn't notice Brenda standing in the hallway entrance, leaning against the frame, listening. So the apartment will be available? Brenda asked, stepping into the room. She was wearing pajamas, looking disheveled. No, Brenda, I said, my patience already thinning. It will be rented. To a paying tenant. Brenda looked at Mom. A silent look passed between them. It was a look of calculation. Well, Mom said, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. That's interesting timing. Because Brenda is having a bit of a crisis. My landlord is kicking me out, Brenda said flatly. He's selling the building. She has to be out by the 1st, Dad added. And she has nowhere to go. The rents are too high. That's unfortunate, I said, keeping my guard up. But there are plenty of places in West Palm. Audrey, Mom reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was cold. You have that massive place. And you're leaving. Why can't Brenda and the kids just stay there? Just for a few months? Until she gets back on her feet? I pulled my hand away. Mom, no. Absolutely not. Why not? Brenda snapped. You're not even going to be there. You'd rather rent to a stranger than help your own sister? Yes, I said firmly. Because this is a business asset. I need the income to fund my new company. And frankly, Brenda, you have destroyed every place you've ever lived in. My apartment is full of white leather and glass. It is not child-proof. You care more about your furniture than your family, Brenda spat. I care about my livelihood. I stood up. The answer is no. I have a tenant. The lease is being drawn up. Do not ask me again. I thought I had been clear. I thought I had set a boundary. I needed to use the restroom before I left. I left my purse on the kitchen table. That was the moment. While I was in the bathroom, washing my hands and trying to calm my racing heart, Mom must have rifled through my bag. She knew I kept a spare emergency key, a physical key card, in a small leather pouch attached to my key ring. She must have detached it, slipped it into her pocket, and then smiled at me when I came out. We understand, Audrey, Mom had said as I walked to the door. You have to do what's best for you. Drive safe. It was a lie. A calculated, manipulative lie. She stole from me while I was flushing the toilet. Back in the present, standing in the ruined living room, I looked at Brenda. She stole the key, I said aloud. Mom stole the key from my purse. She saved us, Brenda corrected, looking defiant. Because you wouldn't. And the building security? I asked. How did you get past the doorman? Brenda laughed. Mom called them. She pretended to be you. She has all your info, Audrey. She told them her sister was coming to stay and to authorize the key. She said you lost your phone. Identity theft. Impersonation. Burglary. My parents hadn't just enabled Brenda, they had become her accomplices in a crime against me. They had decided that my property was theirs to redistribute. You realize that's a felony, right? I asked, my voice deadly calm. It's family business, Brenda scoffed. The police won't care about a family dispute. Mom said so. She said even if you found out, you wouldn't do anything. You're too afraid of what people would think. She walked up to me, smelling of stale chips and sweat. So go ahead, Audrey. Prove us right. Walk away. Let us stay. Or, call the police. Call them and throw your own mother under the bus. I dare you. She was so sure of herself. She had spent 30 years watching me fold, watching me apologize for things I didn't do. She thought I was broken. But she was wrong. I wasn't broken. I was done. I looked at the phone in my hand. I looked at the ruin of my sanctuary. And then I looked at the red call button. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt the cold, hard steel of resolve. Okay, I said. And I pressed the button. The phone rang once. Twice. Brenda stood there, hands on her hips, her smirk frozen in place. She was waiting for me to hang up. She was waiting for the just kidding. 911, what is your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, professional, and jarringly loud in the quiet room. Brenda's eyes went wide. The smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a look of genuine, unfiltered shock. I need to report a break-in and trespassing in progress, I said, my voice steady, loud enough for Brenda to hear every word. Address? The operator asked. The penthouse at 500 Ocean Drive, I recited. I am the legal owner of the property. I have arrived to find intruders inside my home who are refusing to vacate. Are the intruders armed? I looked at Brenda. She was shaking her head frantically, mouthing "Stop it. Stop it right now." No weapons visible, I said. But they are hostile. They have destroyed property. And they are claiming residency fraudulently. We have officers in the area, the operator said. Dispatching them now. Are you in a safe location? I am in the unit with them, I said. I am stepping out into the hallway now. Stay on the line, the operator instructed. I lowered the phone but kept the line open. I looked at Brenda. You actually called them, Brenda whispered. Her face had turned a blotchy red. Are you insane? Mom is going to kill you. Mom isn't here, I said coldly. And frankly, Mom is going to have some explaining to do to the police about how she impersonated me to building security. Hang up! Brenda shrieked. She lunged toward me, her hand reaching for the phone. I stepped back quickly, putting the heavy marble kitchen island between us. If you touch me, Brenda, I will add assault to the list of charges, I warned. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack a rib, but I refused to show it. You can't do this to family, Brenda yelled. The kids were all staring now. Mia had put her phone down. The younger boys looked scared. You're going to have me arrested in front of my children? You chose to break in here in front of your children, I countered. You chose to teach them that theft is okay. This is your lesson, not mine. I have a record, Audrey. Brenda was pleading now, her voice cracking. You know that. If I get arrested again, I violate my probation. Rick will use this to take the kids away. I paused. I knew she had a record, shoplifting charges from a few years ago. But I didn't know she was on probation. Then you should have thought about that before you stole my key, I said. You gambled with your freedom, Brenda. You bet that I was too weak to stand up for myself. You lost. I'm leaving. Brenda scrambled toward the pile of boxes. Okay? I'm leaving. Just call them off. Tell them it was a mistake. It's too late, I said. They're already dispatched. You bitch. She grabbed a glass vase from the counter, an antique Venetian glass piece I had bought in Italy, and hurled it at the floor. Crash. The sound was explosive. Shards of blue glass scattered across the hardwood floor. That, I said, pointing at the shattered remains, is destruction of property. Keep going, Brenda. You're just digging the hole deeper. I hate you, she screamed. I have always hated you. You think you're better than everyone just because you have money. You're nothing. You're a lonely, miserable spinster. And you, I said calmly, are a trespasser. I walked backward toward the door, keeping my eyes on her. I stepped out into the hallway and let the heavy door close, but didn't latch it. I leaned against the wall, my legs finally giving way to the trembling. I slid down the wall until I was crouching on the floor. I put the phone back to my ear. I'm in the hallway, I told the operator. Officers are 2 minutes away, she confirmed. I closed my eyes. I could hear Brenda screaming inside the apartment. She was probably calling Mom. The storm was coming. My parents would descend on me with the fury of a hurricane. I was about to become the pariah of the family. I would be disowned. I would be vilified. But for the first time in 30 years, I didn't care. The cord was cut. 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. I sat in the hallway, listening to the muffled sounds of chaos from inside my apartment. I heard Brenda yelling at the kids to pack. I heard things being thrown. Then, the elevator chimed. The doors slid open, and 2 police officers stepped out. One was older, a sergeant with a name tag that read Miller. The other was younger, Officer Davis. They looked serious, their hands resting near their belts. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I'm Audrey, I said, trying to sound composed despite the fact that I was vibrating with adrenaline. I made the call. Ma'am, Sergeant Miller nodded. You reported a break-in? Yes. My sister and her children broke into my property while I was away. They have destroyed the interior and are refusing to leave. Your sister? Miller raised an eyebrow. So this is a civil dispute? My stomach dropped. This was what I feared. No, I said firmly. She is not a tenant. She has no lease. She has never paid rent. She obtained a key illegally, it was stolen from my purse by our mother, and she used fraudulent means to bypass building security. She is a squatter and a trespasser. I handed him the folder I had been holding, the one with the lease agreement for Dr. Reynolds, and a copy of my property deed that I always kept with me for business meetings. This is the proof of ownership. And this, I showed him the frantic texts on my phone from Brenda that were now coming in, admitting guilt. Call them off, I'll leave, don't do this. Okay, Miller said, handing the documents back. Let's see what's going on. He knocked heavily on the door. Police department. Open up. There was a scuffling sound inside, then silence. Open the door, or we will open it for you, Miller announced. The door clicked and swung open. Brenda stood there. She had tried to compose herself, but she looked manic. Her hair was wild, her face flushed. Officers, she said, putting on a fake, trembling voice. Thank God you're here. My sister, she's having a breakdown. She's kicking me and my babies out on the street. She pointed a shaking finger at me. She's mentally unstable. Officer Davis stepped past her, looking at the destruction in the room. The shattered vase. The food on the floor. The general filth. "Ma'am," Miller addressed Brenda. "Do you live here?" "Yes," Brenda cried. "I've been living here for a while now. This is my home. Can you provide a lease?" Miller asked. "My mother has it." Brenda lied effortlessly. "She handles the paperwork. We have an agreement. A verbal agreement. In Florida, a verbal lease is binding." She had done her homework. Or at least, she thought she had. "Audrey," Brenda turned to me, eyes pleading but hard. Tell them Mom said it was okay. Don't lie to the police." "Mom does not own this property," I said, stepping into the doorway behind the officers. "I do. There is no verbal agreement. You broke in yesterday. The building security logs will prove you used a stolen key fob for the first time 24 hours ago." "Liar!" Brenda screamed. "I've been here for a month. I have squatter's rights." There it was. The magic words. Squatter's rights. Sergeant Miller sighed. He looked tired. "Ma'am, if you've been here for 30 days, you might have established residency. Do you have mail delivered here? Utility bills in your name?" Brenda hesitated. Well, no, not yet. But my stuff is here." "Check the security cameras," I interjected. I pulled up the building management app on my phone. Here. This is the log from the front door. Key fob number 2, the spare, was activated yesterday at 4:15 p.m. Before that, it hadn't been used in 6 months. I showed the screen to Sergeant Miller. The evidence was black and white. "That's not 30 days, ma'am," Miller said to Brenda. "That's yesterday." Brenda's face crumpled. Her bluff had been called. "Look," Miller said, his voice hardening. "This is clearly not a residency situation. You are trespassing. The owner wants you out. You have 2 choices. You can gather your essential items and leave voluntarily right now. Or we can arrest you for criminal trespass and remove you." Brenda looked at the officers, then at me. The realization that her squatter rights Hail Mary had failed washed over her. "I can't go anywhere," she sobbed. "I have nowhere to go." "That is not the owner's problem," Miller said. "Start packing." Brenda turned to me, her eyes filled with pure hatred. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me suffer?" "I'm not enjoying it," I said quietly. "I'm ending it." "You'll pay for this," she hissed. "Mom is on her way. She's going to fix this." "Mom can't fix a felony," I said. Brenda moved to grab her purse, but then she stopped. She looked at the glass vase shards on the floor. She looked at Officer Davis, who was standing near the expensive sculpture. A dark, chaotic look entered her eyes. If she couldn't have the apartment, she was going to make sure I couldn't have it either. She lunged toward the pedestal holding the ceramic sculpture. "No!" I screamed, lunging forward instinctively, but Officer Davis was faster. As Brenda reached for the sculpture, a $12,000 piece by a renowned Japanese artist, Davis grabbed her arm. "Don't do it, ma'am," he warned. "Get off me!" Brenda shrieked. She spun around, wild-eyed, and swung her other hand. Her nails raked across Officer Davis's face, leaving 3 angry red scratches on his cheek. The room went dead silent for a microsecond. Assaulting a police officer. "That's it," Sergeant Miller barked. "You are under arrest." Before Brenda could process what was happening, Miller had grabbed her other arm. They spun her around and slammed her against the wall, my pristine white wall, which now had a smudge of her makeup on it. "You're hurting me!" Brenda screamed. "Help! Police brutality! Someone filmed this! Mia, film this!" Mia, terrified, held up her phone, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "Stop fighting!" Miller ordered as Brenda kicked and thrashed. She was strong, fueled by adrenaline and rage. She managed to kick over a side table, sending a lamp crashing to the floor. "Let me go! I'm a mother! You can't arrest a mother! You're under arrest for trespassing, destruction of property, and battery on a law enforcement officer," Miller recited, snapping the handcuffs onto her wrists. The metallic click-click was the loudest sound in the world. Brenda slumped against the wall, the fight suddenly draining out of her. She looked at the handcuffs, then at me. Her face was a mask of disbelief. "Audrey," she whispered. "Tell them to stop. Please. I'm your sister." I looked at her. I looked at the scratches on the officer's face. I looked at my destroyed home. "You should have left when I asked," I said softly. Officer Davis was wiping a drop of blood from his cheek. "Get her out of here," he muttered to Miller. They hauled Brenda up and began marching her toward the door. She was sobbing now, ugly, heaving sobs. "My kids! What about my kids?" she wailed. I looked at the children. The two boys were huddled behind the sofa, crying silently. Mia was standing there, phone lowered, looking at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. "We'll call Child Protective Services," Miller said. "No!" I stepped forward. Despite everything, I couldn't let my nephews and niece go into the system. No CPS. Their grandparents are on the way. I will stay with them until they arrive. Miller looked at me, assessing. "Are you sure, ma'am?" After she just. "Yes," I said. "They are innocent in this." Brenda looked back at me as they dragged her into the hallway. "Mom is going to kill you," she screamed one last time before the elevator doors closed. The silence that followed was heavy. I was alone in the wreckage with 3 terrified children. "Is Mom going to jail?" one of the boys asked, his voice trembling. I knelt down, ignoring the sharp glass on the floor. She has to go answer some questions. Grandma and Grandpa are coming to get you." I sat on the ruined sofa and waited. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mom. I answered on speakerphone. "Audrey." Her voice was shrill, hysterical. "Brenda just called me from the police car." "What have you done? Have you lost your mind?" "She broke into my house, Mom," I said calmly. "And she assaulted a police officer." "Because you provoked her." Mom screamed. "You called the police on family. How could you? We are 5 minutes away. You better fix this. You better drop the charges right now." "It's out of my hands," I said. "The state presses charges for assault on an officer, not me. And as for the trespassing, I am pressing those charges." "And Mom?" "What?" she hissed. "I told the police about the key," I said. "I told them how she got it. I told them about the impersonation." There was a silence on the other end. A fearful silence. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "You stole from me," I said. "You set me up. You sent your daughter here to rob me, and now she's in handcuffs. This is on you." I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't the erratic rhythm of panic anymore. It was the steady, strong beat of someone who had finally taken control. I looked around the room. It was destroyed. I would lose the tenant. I would lose thousands of dollars. But I had gained something much more valuable. I had gained my self-respect. The look on Brenda's face when those handcuffs clicked, it wasn't triumph I felt, but relief. Relief that the gaslighting was over. Relief that reality had finally crashed into their delusion. I know this is intense. I know it's hard to imagine doing this to your own sister. But sometimes, you have to amputate the limb to save the body. If you are still listening, if you are still with me in this messy, painful moment of liberation, please hit that like button and comment the number 1 below. It tells me that you understand. It tells me that you believe we have the right to protect our sanctuaries, even from the people we share DNA with. Your support means the world to me. Please, comment 1 now. Because what happened next, when my parents arrived at the door, well, let's just say the war was far from over. The 30 minutes I spent waiting for my parents were the longest of my life. I was sitting on the edge of the ruined white sofa, careful to avoid the mysterious dark stains on the cushion. Across the room, my niece and nephews were huddled together near the window. I had given them some bottled water and a pack of unopened crackers I found in the back of the pantry, one of the few things Brenda hadn't devoured yet. The silence was heavy, suffocating. It was filled with the unspoken terror of what had just happened. Mia, the 14-year-old, wasn't looking at her phone anymore. She was looking at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, swollen, and filled with a mixture of fear and something that looked painfully like resentment. She didn't understand. How could she? To her, I was the villain who had just sent her mother away in a police car. She didn't know about the stolen key, the fraud, or the lifetime of manipulation. She just saw the handcuffs. I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell her, Mia, I did this to save myself. I did this because your mother refused to stop hurting me. But I stayed silent. She was a child. She shouldn't have to carry the weight of adult sins. Then, the buzz of the intercom shattered the silence. Penthouse, I answered, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Mr. and Mrs. Miller are here, the doorman said. His voice was icy. After the police presence earlier, the building staff was clearly unhappy with me, or perhaps confused. They say they are the grandparents. Send them up, I said. I hung up and stood. Your grandparents are here, I told the kids. They scrambled up, grabbing their backpacks, desperate to escape the tension of the room. When the elevator doors opened, I expected to see concern. I expected to see 2 grandparents rushing to comfort their traumatized grandchildren. I expected tears, hugs, maybe a frantic questions about where Brenda was being held. I was wrong. My mother, Barbara, stormed out of the elevator like a heat-seeking missile. She didn't even look at the children. Her eyes locked onto me instantly. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. My father, Robert, trailed behind her, his face flushed a deep, dangerous purple. You monster! Mom screamed. The sound echoed off the marble floors. She marched right up to me, ignoring Mia who had taken a step toward her. You actually did it? You had your sister arrested? She assaulted a police officer, Mom, I said, standing my ground. I refused to cower. I was 31 years old, the owner of this property, and I was done being their punching bag. Because you provoked her. Mom yelled, invading my personal space. She smelled of nervous sweat and her heavy floral perfume. You backed her into a corner. She called me. She was hysterical. She said you were taunting her. I asked her to leave, I said calmly. She refused. She claimed she had a right to be here because you gave her a key. A key you stole from my purse. Mom didn't even flinch. She didn't deny it. She didn't look ashamed. Instead, she doubled down. I didn't steal it, she spat. I took it. Because I am your mother, and I decide what is best for this family. You are hoarding this place, leaving it empty while your sister was suffering. It was a sin, Audrey. A sin of greed. It's not greed to own property, I said. And it's not generosity to steal it. Shut up, Dad roared. He stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Don't you dare talk to your mother like that. You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you? What have you done for me, Dad? I asked, looking him dead in the eye. Besides ignore me for 30 years until you needed money? We raised you, he shouted. We put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay us? By throwing our daughter in jail? Do you know what this is going to do to her? To her reputation? To the kids? Brenda did this to herself, I said. She broke the law. She broke into my home. She attacked a cop. Those were her choices. She was desperate. Mom cried, tears finally starting to flow, not for me, but for her golden child. She has nowhere to go. She needed help, and you have so much. Why couldn't you just share? Why are you so cold? I am not cold, I said, my voice shaking with the effort to keep from screaming. I am exhausted. I am exhausted of being the resource you harvest. I am exhausted of you loving Brenda's failures more than you love my successes. Don't you dare compare yourself to her, Mom hissed. Brenda has a good heart. She just has bad luck. You have a stone where your heart should be. You care more about your white sofa and your fancy rugs than you do about your own blood. She looked around the room, finally noticing the chaos. The shattered glass. The food stains. Look at this, she gestured at the mess. It's just things. It's just furniture. It can be replaced. You can't replace family. You're right, I said softly. You can't replace family. But you can choose to leave a toxic one. Dad stepped closer, raising a finger to my face. You listen to me. You are going to go down to that police station right now. You are going to drop the charges. You are going to tell them it was a misunderstanding. And then you are going to pay for Brenda's lawyer. I stared at him. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. No, I said. Excuse me? Dad looked like he hadn't heard me correctly. No. I am pressing charges for trespassing. I gave the police my statement. I gave them the security logs proving the key was stolen. And I am certainly not paying for her lawyer. She can use a public defender. Dad's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. He raised his hand. For a split second, I thought he was going to hit me. I flinched, my body remembering the discipline of my childhood. But he didn't hit me. He stopped, his hand trembling in the air. Maybe he realized there were cameras. Maybe he realized I wasn't a child anymore. If you do this, he whispered, his voice shaking with menace, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? You are no daughter of mine. I looked at him. I looked at Mom, who was glaring at me with pure hatred. And then I looked at the kids, who were watching their grandparents disown their aunt. I accepted that a long time ago, I said quietly. Now take the children and get out of my house. The departure was chaotic and ugly. Mom bustled the kids into the elevator, cooing at them, telling them that Aunt Audrey is sick in the head and that everything would be okay. Mia looked back at me one last time before the doors closed. Her expression had shifted from fear to confusion. I hoped, someday, she would understand. Dad lingered for a moment longer. He stood in the doorway, looking at the ruin of the apartment, and then at me. You'll regret this, he said. When you're old and alone in your big, empty house, you'll remember this day. You'll realize that money can't hug you back. Neither did you, Dad, I replied. He flinched, just a little. Then he turned and walked into the elevator. When the doors slid shut, the silence that rushed back into the room was absolute. It pressed against my eardrums. I was alone. Truly, finally alone. I walked over to the door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I slid the chain lock into place. It was a symbolic gesture. They had the key, after all, but it made me feel safer. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor again. I pulled my knees to my chest. I expected to cry. I expected to feel a crushing wave of grief. I had just orphaned myself. I had cut the cord. But the tears didn't come. Instead, a strange, hollow buzzing filled my head. I felt light. Unmoored. I looked around the room. The sun was starting to set, casting long, orange shadows across the debris. The shattered blue glass from the vase sparkled in the dying light like dangerous jewels. The smell of stale chips and dirty laundry was still thick in the air. I stood up. I couldn't sit in the wreckage. I had to do something. I had to reclaim my space. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed a trash bag. I started with the obvious things. The pizza boxes. The soda cans. The candy wrappers. I moved robotically, throwing Brenda's filth into the black plastic sack. As I cleaned, my mind started to replay the confrontation. My father's threat. You are dead to us. It should have hurt. But the truth was, I had been grieving them for years. I had been grieving the parents I wanted, not the ones I had. I had been mourning the fantasy of a loving family every time I watched a movie or saw a commercial where a mother hugged her daughter. What I had just done wasn't a murder of the relationship, it was a funeral. The relationship had been dead for decades. I had just finally buried the body. I moved to the living room area where Brenda had set up her nest. There was a pile of papers on the side table, underneath a half-eaten bag of cookies. I picked them up, intending to throw them away, but something caught my eye. It was a letter. The envelope was red, marked Final Notice. It was addressed to Brenda Miller. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. It wasn't a utility bill. It wasn't a credit card statement. It was a collection notice from a company called Quick Cash Advance. Dear Ms. Miller, this is your final warning regarding the outstanding balance of $12,450. Failure to remit payment within 48 hours will result in legal action and wage garnishment. I frowned. $12,000? For what? I dug deeper into the pile. There were more letters. Different companies, same threatening tone. Payday loans are U.S. Sunshine State Cash. Crypto credit. The dates on the letters were recent. The totals were staggering. When I added them up in my head, the sum was over $50,000. Brenda wasn't just broke. She was drowning. Then I found the notebook. It was a cheap spiral-bound notebook buried under a pile of magazines. I opened it. It was filled with Brenda's handwriting. October 12th, lost $500 on Lucky 7. Need to win it back. October 14th, Rick is late with child support. Borrowed $200 from mom. October 15th, put $1,000 on the Dolphins game. Damn it. It was a gambling diary. I flipped through the pages. It was a catalog of addiction. Online slots. Sports betting. Poker apps. She was bleeding money she didn't have, chasing a high she couldn't catch. I sat down on the edge of the coffee table, the notebook heavy in my hand. This was why she needed the apartment. It wasn't just about rent. She needed to disappear. She needed a place where the debt collectors couldn't find her. She needed to live rent-free so every penny she scrounged could go back into the gambling apps. And my parents knew. They had to know. Mom had mentioned Brenda's bad luck. Dad had mentioned she needed to get back on her feet. They knew she was in deep trouble. And instead of getting her help, instead of sending her to therapy or Gamblers Anonymous, they had tried to feed her me. They had looked at my success, my stability, and decided I was the perfect life raft to throw into Brenda's storm. They didn't care if I drowned, as long as their precious golden child stayed afloat a little longer. The realization made me nauseous. I wasn't just a daughter to them. I was an asset. I was an insurance policy they were trying to cash in without my consent. I took a picture of the letters and the notebook with my phone. Evidence. Always keep the paperwork. That was my motto. I threw the rest of the papers into the trash. I didn't want Brenda's demons in my house. I worked for 3 hours straight. I stripped the sheets off the beds Brenda had used. I scrubbed the crayon off the walls until my knuckles were raw. I threw away the rug that couldn't be saved. By 9 p.m., the apartment was empty of trash, though the smell lingered. I was exhausted, sweaty, and my hands smelled of bleach. I ordered a locksmith to come first thing in the morning to change the entire system, not just the codes. I was going to wipe every trace of them from this place. I walked out onto the balcony. The Miami night air was humid and salty. I looked down at the city lights reflecting on the black ocean. I picked up my phone. I needed to call the one person who might understand. I dialed Aunt Sylvia. The phone rang 3 times before Aunt Sylvia picked up. Audrey? Her voice was groggy. I glanced at my watch and realized it was late, even for her. Or maybe she was in Europe. I couldn't remember. Aunt Sylvia, I said, my voice cracking for the first time that day. I did it. I called the police on Brenda. There was a pause on the other end. Then, a sigh that sounded like a heavyweight being set down. Oh, honey. I heard. Your mother has been blowing up the family group chat for the last 2 hours. She's telling everyone you've had a psychotic break. I haven't, I said, gripping the balcony railing. I'm the sanest I've ever been. She broke in, Sylvia. Mom stole my key and let Brenda move in. They trashed the place. I know, Sylvia said softly. I saw the pictures Brenda posted on Facebook yesterday. New views, new life, she captioned it. I knew immediately it was your place. I was about to call you when I heard about the arrest. You knew? I felt a flash of irritation. Why didn't you warn me? I didn't want to be the one to tell you, she admitted. And frankly, I didn't think you'd believe me. You've always had a blind spot for them, Audrey. You've always wanted them to be better people than they are. Well, the blind spot is gone, I said. I found Brenda's gambling diary. She's 50 grand in the hole. That's why they did it. They wanted to hide her here. Gambling, Sylvia made a noise of disgust. She's just like your grandfather. It skips a generation, they say. But Robert, your father, he's worse. What do you mean? Audrey, Sylvia's tone changed. It became serious, urgent. Since you've finally cut the cord, there is something you need to know. Something I promised I wouldn't tell you because I didn't want to destroy the little relationship you had left with them. But now? Now you need to know who you're dealing with. My stomach tightened. What is it? Do you remember when you applied for your first business loan? For the studio in Miami? Yes, I said. I got rejected by 3 banks. They said my debt-to-income ratio was too high. I didn't understand it at the time because I had 0 debt. I thought it was a mistake. Eventually, I found a private lender. It wasn't a mistake, Sylvia said. What do you mean? You had a student loan, Audrey. A $40,000 student loan. That's impossible, I argued. I worked 3 jobs. I paid my tuition in cash. I never took a loan. You didn't, Sylvia said. Your parents did. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What? When you were 19, Sylvia explained, her voice trembling with suppressed anger, Robert and Barbara took out a Parent Plus loan. But they structured it under your name as a co-signer. They forged your signature, Audrey. I saw the papers years later when I was helping your dad with his taxes. They forged my signature? I couldn't breathe. Yes. And the money didn't go to your tuition. You were paying your own tuition. Where did the money go? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It bought Brenda a car, Sylvia said. A brand new Jeep Cherokee. And the rest went to pay off credit card debt they had racked up buying her clothes and vacations. I slid down the balcony wall, sitting on the cold concrete. They stole my identity? To buy Brenda a car? Yes. And they never paid it back. It went into default. That's why your credit score took a hit back then. When I found out, I threatened to go to the police. Robert begged me not to. He said it would destroy the family. He said it was a misunderstanding. So, I made a deal. What deal? I paid it off, Sylvia said quietly. I used my savings. I paid off the entire $40,000 to clear your name. I told them if they ever did it again, I would turn them in. And I made them promise never to tell you, because I didn't want you to carry that burden. I sat there in the dark, tears finally streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of pure, unadulterated shock. My aunt, the woman my parents called selfish and eccentric, had secretly saved my financial future. Meanwhile, my parents, the pillars of the community, had committed a federal crime against their own teenage daughter to spoil their other child. You paid it off? I whispered. Sylvia, that was your retirement money. You were the only investment in this family worth making, Sylvia said firmly. And look at you. You built an empire. I knew you would. I don't know what to say, I choked out. Don't say anything. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Get a lawyer, Sylvia said. A real one. Not a strip mall lawyer. Get a shark. Because now that you've cut them off, they are going to come after you. They feel entitled to your money, Audrey. They think your success belongs to them because they raised you. You need to protect yourself. I will, I promised. I'm going to burn the bridge, Sylvia. I'm going to nuke it. Good, she said. I've been waiting 20 years for you to light the match. I hung up the phone. I sat on the balcony for a long time, listening to the ocean. My parents weren't just toxic. They were criminals. They had been stealing from me since I was 19. Every time they called me ungrateful, every time they guilt-tripped me for not sharing, they were sitting on a secret of a $40,000 theft. The anger that rose in me then was different from the rage I felt earlier. This was colder. This was calculated. I stood up and walked back inside. I picked up my laptop. It was 10 p.m. I wasn't going to sleep. I searched for top litigators Los Angeles. If my family wanted a war over assets, I was going to give them one. And I was going to bring the nuclear codes. The next morning, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a CEO preparing for a hostile takeover. I had the locks changed at 8 a.m. I hired a specialized cleaning crew to sanitize the apartment at 9 a.m. By 10 a.m., I was on a video call with Julian Thorne. Julian was a lawyer based in Los Angeles, known as the Barracuda of Beverly Hills. He charged $800 an hour, and looking at his sharp suit and sharper eyes through the screen, I knew he was worth every penny. So, let me get this straight, Julian said, leaning back in his leather chair. Your sister trespassed, your mother committed identity theft regarding the key fob, and now you have evidence of past financial fraud involving a student loan? Yes, I said. And I want to make sure they can never touch me or my assets again. This isn't just a restraining order, Audrey, Julian said, tapping his pen on the desk. This is a fortress we need to build. If your sister has a gambling addiction and your parents are enablers with a history of fraud, they will view your move to California as an abandonment of their bank. They will try to sue you for support. They might even try to claim you promised them the apartment verbally. That's exactly what Brenda tried to tell the police, I said. Right. So we strike first. Julian's eyes gleamed. We file for a permanent order of protection in Florida and domesticate it in California. We send a cease and desist regarding the defamation, your mother's texts and calls to family members. And regarding the student loan fraud, the statute of limitations might have passed for criminal charges, but we can use it. How? Leverage, Julian smiled. We draft a civil complaint outlining the fraud, the forgery, and the theft. We send it to them with a settlement offer, they agree to a lifetime no-contact order and waive any future claims to your estate, or we file the suit and make their crimes public record. We threaten to expose them to their church, their neighbors, their golf buddies. They care about their reputation more than anything, I realized. Exactly. We weaponize their shame. Do it, I said. Draw it up. The next few days were a blur of logistics. I flew back to Los Angeles to finalize the new studio, leaving Mark to handle the Miami cleanup. I blocked my parents and Brenda on everything. Phone, email, social media. But the messages still found ways to get through. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent me DMs, I heard what you did to Brenda. How could you be so heartless? My mother used a neighbor's phone to leave a voicemail, you are destroying this family. God will punish you. I didn't delete the voicemail. I forwarded it to Julian. A week later, the nuclear bomb landed. Julian sent the legal packet via a process server to my parents' house. I wasn't there to see it, but I could imagine the scene. The knock on the door. Dad answering, expecting a neighbor. Being handed a thick envelope stamped Thorne and Associates, attorneys at law. Opening it to find a detailed accounting of their fraud from 12 years ago, attached to a sworn affidavit from Aunt Sylvia. The silence that followed was deafening. The harassing messages from cousins stopped. The voicemails stopped. They knew I had the smoking gun. 3 days later, I received the signed agreement. They had capitulated. They agreed to never contact me again, to stay 500 yards away from me and my properties, and to acknowledge they had no claim to my assets. It was over. I sat in my new, empty office in Beverly Hills, holding the digital copy of the signed document. I should have felt sad. This was the legal document that officially made me an orphan. But all I felt was the cool breeze coming in from the window. I picked up my phone and called Mark in Miami. How's the apartment? I asked. It's pristine, Mark said. The cleaners did miracles. The smell is gone. We replaced the rug. And Audrey? Yes. I showed it to the French couple I told you about. The tech executives? They loved it. They offered 20% over asking price for a 2-year lease. They want to move in next week. Take it, I said. Draft the lease. Consider it done. And Audrey, I'm sorry about your family. Don't be, I said, looking out at the palm trees of Rodeo Drive. It was just a renovation. Sometimes you have to gut the whole interior to build something beautiful. The next 6 months were the most productive of my life. Without the constant emotional drain of my family, without the dread of the next crisis phone call, I had an infinite amount of energy. I poured it all into Audrey Interiors West. My showroom on Rodeo Drive opened with a splash. I designed it to look less like a store and more like an art gallery. Minimalist, serene, expensive. It attracted exactly the right clientele. My first big client was a famous actress who wanted to redesign her Malibu beach house. She was tired of the cluttered boho look and wanted peace. "I want to walk in and feel like I'm in a cloud," she told me. "I know exactly how to do that," I promised. I worked tirelessly. I was on site every day, managing contractors, sourcing materials. I was obsessed with the details. But this time, the obsession wasn't a trauma response, it was passion. I wasn't trying to prove myself to my parents. I was expressing myself. The project was featured in Vogue Living. The headline read, "The Queen of Calm, How Audrey Miller is Redefining West Coast Minimalism." When the magazine came out, I bought a copy. I sat in a cafe on Sunset Boulevard, drinking an overpriced latte, and looked at my name in glossy print. In the old days, my first instinct would have been to mail a copy to my parents. To say, Look, I did it. Do you love me now?" No, I just smiled and closed the magazine. I didn't need to send it to them. I knew they would never see it. They didn't read Vogue Living. They were too busy drowning in the mess they had created. I was making friends, too. Real friends. Not people who wanted something from me, but people who were driven and creative like I was. There was Elena, a lighting designer from Brazil. And David, a landscape architect. We started having weekly dinners. We talked about art, about business, about life. One night, over wine, the topic of family came up. "My mom drives me crazy," Elena laughed. "She calls me 3 times a day." "I haven't spoken to my parents in 6 months," I said. The table went quiet. They looked at me, waiting for the sadness, the excuse. "It was the best decision I ever made," I added, taking a sip of Pinot Noir. David raised his glass. "To chosen family," he said. To chosen family, we clinked glasses. That night, I went home to my rented condo in the hills. I was waiting to buy until the business stabilized, and felt a profound sense of peace. My phone was silent. No emergency texts. No guilt trips. I was free. But the universe has a way of balancing the scales. While I was rising, the house of cards in Florida was collapsing. News travels, even when you block the sources. Aunt Sylvia was my conduit, my spy behind enemy lines. We spoke once a month. "It's bad, Audrey," she told me during one of our calls. "Worse than I thought." "Tell me," I said. I was sitting in my office, sketching a custom shelving unit. I felt detached, like I was hearing about characters in a book I used to read. "Brenda's arrest was the domino," Sylvia explained. Because she was arrested for a felony, assault on a police officer, the state didn't go easy on her. She took a plea deal to avoid jail time, but she got 3 years of strict probation and 500 hours of community service. And a criminal record. And the kids? That's the kicker, Sylvia sighed. Rick, her ex-husband, found out immediately. He went to family court. He argued that Brenda was unstable, homeless, and a criminal. He showed the judge the police report from your apartment. The gambling debt came out in court, too. And? He got full custody. Brenda only gets supervised visits once a month. I closed my eyes. I felt a pang of sympathy for the kids. But I also knew they were better off with Rick. Rick was an elitist jerk, but he was stable. He had a house. He had a job. He didn't gamble their grocery money. Brenda had a breakdown in the courtroom, Sylvia continued. Screaming that it was all your fault. That you stole her children. Of course she did, I said. Personal responsibility isn't in her vocabulary. But it gets worse for Robert and Barbara. How? To pay for Brenda's defense attorney, because they refused to use a public defender, they wanted a real lawyer to fight the big bad Audrey, they refinanced their house. They took out a second mortgage. A predatory one. Oh no, I whispered. And then the gambling debts came calling. The loan sharks Brenda owed? They started showing up at your parents' house. Robert got scared. He cashed out his 401k to pay them off. All of it. They liquidated their retirement? Everything. They are broke, Audrey. They are living on Social Security. And now, with the high interest rates on the mortgage, they're going to lose the house. The bank has already sent a pre-foreclosure notice. I stared at the wall. The house I grew up in. The house where I was ignored. The house where Brenda was worshipped. It was going to be taken by the bank. They are panicked, Sylvia said. They are blaming everyone. The economy, the lawyers, you, me. But they are drowning. Robert had a minor heart attack last week from the stress. Is he okay? I asked, a reflex. He's fine. He was discharged. But he's frail. And Brenda? She's living with them. Sleeping in her old high school bedroom. A 38-year-old woman with a criminal record, no kids, and no job, screaming at her bankrupt parents all day. It's a house of horrors. I tried to imagine it. The three of them, trapped in that ranch house, feeding on each other's misery. It was a tragedy. But it was a tragedy they had written, directed, and starred in. Do they ask about me? I asked. Every day, Sylvia said. But not because they miss you. They ask if I've talked to you. They ask if you know. They are waiting for you to swoop in and save them. They still think you're the safety net. I'm not, I said firmly. I know. I told them you're gone. That you're never coming back. Barbara cried. She said, but she's rich. She's famous now. I saw her in a magazine. How can she let her parents starve? I'm not letting them starve, I said. They have food. They just don't have the lifestyle they think they deserve. You did the right thing, Audrey, Sylvia said. Don't let them drag you back in. I won't. I hung up the phone. I looked at the sketch on my desk. It was a design for a library. Clean lines. Strong foundations. I realized then that my parents were like a house with termites. They looked solid from the outside, but inside, they had been rotting for years. I had escaped just before the roof caved in. I went back to work. I had a deadline. And unlike Brenda, I paid my bills. 2 months later, the inevitable happened. I was in a meeting with a supplier when my assistant, Jessica, knocked on the door. She looked confused. Audrey? There's a package for you. It was hand-delivered. No return address. I frowned. Bring it in. She placed a battered cardboard box on my sleek glass desk. It looked out of place in the pristine office. It smelled faintly of old paper and desperation. I opened it. Inside was a photo album. The photo album. The one from my childhood. I flipped through it. There were pictures of me as a baby. Pictures of me at graduation. Pictures of the family at Disney World, all of us smiling fake smiles. Tucked into the last page was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was shaky. It was my mother's. Audrey. We are losing the house. The auction is next Tuesday. We have nowhere to go. Brenda is sick. Your father is sick. We are sleeping on mattresses on the floor because we sold the furniture. We know we made mistakes. We are sorry. We were wrong about everything. You were the special one all along. We see that now. Please. We are begging you. We don't need much. Just enough to stop the foreclosure. $50,000. It is nothing to you. It is life or death for us. If you don't help, we will be homeless. Do you want that on your conscience? Love. Mom and Dad. I stared at the letter. You were the special one all along. It was the sentence I had waited 30 years to hear. The validation. The apology. But as I read it again, I saw it for what it was. It wasn't an apology. It was a transaction. They were trading a compliment for cash. They were selling me the title of special daughter for the price of $50,000. If I sent the money, nothing would change. They would pay the bank, and then next month, Brenda would gamble it away again. Or they would need money for taxes. Or medical bills. It would never end. I would become the new host for the parasite. And the part about my conscience? That was the final manipulation. I closed the album. I looked at the faces in the photos. They looked like strangers. I picked up my pen and grabbed a piece of my company stationery. I wrote one sentence. I suggest you ask Brenda for help. She was the one you invested in. I didn't sign it. I put the note in an envelope. I put the photo album back in the box. Jessica, I called out. My assistant poked her head in. Yes. Return to sender, I said, pushing the box off my desk. And if anything else comes from Florida, throw it directly in the shredder. Don't even show me. Understood. As the box left the room, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I had just passed the final test. I had refused the bait. I turned back to my computer. I had a business to run. A year later, I was standing on the terrace of my new home. I had finally bought a place, a mid-century modern gem in the Hollywood Hills. It had glass walls, a pool that overlooked the city, and absolute, perfect silence. Sylvia was sitting on the lounge chair, sipping an iced tea. She had flown out to visit me for her 70th birthday. I had flown her first class. This view, Sylvia said, shaking her head. It's incredible, Audrey. You really did it. We did it, I corrected, sitting down next to her. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't saved me from that loan. PSHH, she waved her hand. You would have figured it out. You're a survivor. I have news, I said. About them. Sylvia stiffened. Oh. I heard through a mutual acquaintance. They lost the house. I know, Sylvia nodded. They were evicted last month. Where are they? They moved into a trailer park in Ocala, Sylvia said. It's grim. Brenda is working as a waitress at a diner. Robert is greeting at Walmart. Barbara cleans houses. I absorbed the information. The mighty had fallen. The parents who looked down on everyone, who thought they were entitled to the world, were now working minimum wage jobs in their 60s to survive. Do you feel sorry for them? Sylvia asked, watching me closely. I looked out at the city. I thought about the little girl waiting for her parents at the piano recital. I thought about the woman standing in a trash-filled penthouse. I feel sad for the little girl I said honestly. But for them? No. They made every single choice that led them to that trailer park. They chose Brenda over me. They chose fraud over honesty. They chose gambling over security. This is just the consequence of those choices. That's a healthy way to look at it, Sylvia smiled. I don't hate them anymore, I said. I just I don't feel anything. They are just people I used to know. The doorbell rang. That must be the gang, I said, standing up. The gang? Elena, David, and a few others. We're throwing you a birthday party, remember? Sylvia beamed. A party for me? You're the matriarch of this family now, Sylvia, I said, kissing her cheek. I walked to the door to let my friends in. My real family. The people who celebrated my wins and supported me through the losses. The people who didn't steal my keys or my identity. As I opened the door, laughter spilled into the house. The smell of good food and expensive wine filled the air. I was home. Looking back, that day in Miami was the worst day of my life. It was humiliating, terrifying, and heartbreaking. But it was also the best day of my life. It was the day I stopped waiting for permission to be happy. We are taught that family is everything. That blood is thicker than water. That you have to forgive your family no matter what. But that is a lie. Family is not a suicide pact. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, even if those others are your parents. I learned that you can build your own sanctuary. You can build it with hard work, with boundaries, and with the people who truly love you. My sister Brenda is still angry. My parents are still bitter. They tell their story to anyone who will listen, the story of the ungrateful, rich daughter who abandoned them. They play the victims perfectly. But I know the truth. And the truth has set me free. I still have the yellow rose Aunt Sylvia gave me at the recital. It's dried and pressed in a frame in my office. It reminds me that even when the front row is empty, you still have to play your music. You play it for yourself. And eventually, the right audience will find you. My name is Audrey. I am an interior designer. I am a survivor. And this is my sanctuary. No trespassers allowed. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it was a long journey, but I wanted to share every detail because I know there are so many of you out there dealing with your own Brendas and your own toxic parents. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that anger and that relief, please give this video a like. It helps more than you know. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut off a family member to save yourself? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice, resilience, and taking back control of your life. You are strong. You are worthy. And you are not alone. Until next time, protect your peace.